Whispers behind. Gilded doors, Dominic Harrington stepped onto the balcony of his penthouse, the Manhattan skyline glittering like scattered diamonds against the night. At 42, he commanded a tech empire worth billions, yet these quiet moments revealed a weariness that wealth couldn't mask. His phone buzzed for the 5th time, messages from his board, his assistant, and 3 from his mother. He ignored them all, nursing his scotch as tomorrow's charity gala loomed. Another evening of whispers, another round of pitying glances from family members who couldn't understand why the Harrington legacy remained without an heir. "The files you requested, Mr. Harrington." The voice was soft, almost melodic. Dominic turned to see Valeria Navarro standing in the doorway. At 34, she'd worked as his executive assistant for 3 years, the longest anyone had survived in the position. Her simple navy dress and minimal jewelry stood in stark contrast to the excess that typically surrounded him. "Thank you, Valeria. You should have gone home hours ago." He accepted the folder. Noticing her hands were stained with ink, she'd been annotating documents again, a habit she refused to abandon for digital alternatives. The Singapore proposal needed revisions. She hesitated before adding, "Your mother called the office twice." Dominic sighed. "Let me guess, she's bringing eligible candidates to the gala?" 3, according to her assistant. "All with impeccable breeding," her words. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "You've mastered her tone perfectly." 3 years of forwarding her calls gives one practice. Their eyes met, and for a brief moment the professional veneer between them thinned. Dominic had always appreciated her quiet competence, her ability to anticipate needs without the sycophantic fawning his wealth typically attracted. "Will you be attending tomorrow?" he asked. "Staff don't usually—" "I'm asking if you want to." Valeria studied him, her dark eyes unreadable. "You need an ally among the sharks." It wasn't a question, but he answered anyway. "I've survived 30 galas alone. But yes, another friendly face would be welcome." The next evening, Dominic stood surrounded by New York's elite, mechanically shaking hands while scanning the room for his mother, Cordelia Harrington. At 72, she remained a formidable presence in both business and society, her silver hair swept into an immaculate chignon as she held court across the ballroom. "Dominic, darling," her voice carried over the chamber music. "Come meet Genevieve Lockhart. Her family's pharmaceutical patents would pair wonderfully with your tech holdings." The introduction was transparent in its agenda. Genevieve, though undeniably beautiful, viewed him with calculating eyes that assessed his net worth rather than his character. "Your mother tells me you've been seeking to expand your legacy," she purred, one manicured hand touching his arm. Before Dominic could respond, his cousin Frederick materialized beside them. "Still shopping for a broodmare, Dom? The Harrington genetic line grows thinner each year." His words were wrapped in a smile but delivered like poison. Dominic's jaw tightened. 8 years earlier, his engagement to Patricia Winters had ended catastrophically when she admitted she'd only accepted his proposal to access his connections. "I need a power couple, not love," she'd explained while returning his grandmother's ring. The public humiliation had been fodder for gossip columns for months. He was preparing a cutting response when he spotted Valeria entering the ballroom. She wore a simple emerald dress that caught the light, her dark hair falling in soft waves. Unlike every other woman present, she wore no ostentatious jewelry, no designer label screaming for attention. She moved through the crowd with quiet grace, seemingly immune to the curious glances. When their eyes met across the room, she offered a small, reassuring smile that somehow steadied him. "Excuse me," Dominic said, leaving his cousin mid-sentence. He crossed the room to Valeria, aware of the whispers following him. "You came." "I said I would." She handed him a champagne flute. "Your mother has arranged 3 introductions. Your cousin has placed bets on your continued bachelorhood. The board members in attendance are discussing succession planning." Dominic took a long sip. "All in the first 20 minutes. Impressive efficiency." "That's why you pay me the obscene salary," Valeria replied, her eyes twinkling with rare humor. For the first time that evening, Dominic felt himself truly smile. Little did he know that this moment, This simple exchange amidst the opulence would soon alter the course of both their lives in ways neither could imagine. The unexpected proposal, the quarterly board meeting of Harrington. Technologies became a battlefield the moment Cordelia. Harrington took the floor. "My son's personal choices are becoming a corporate liability," she announced to the 12. Stern faces surrounding the mahogany table. The Harrington name must continue, not just for family pride, but for market stability. Dominic maintained his composure, though his knuckles whitened around his pen. At the far end of the table, Valeria quietly documented the proceedings, her face betraying nothing. "Mother, with all due respect, my personal life is not a business agenda item. It is when Forbes runs an article questioning whether your bachelorhood indicates instability," countered Frederick, sliding a tablet across the table. The headline glared accusingly. "Last of the Harrington line, is Tech's Golden Empire building on sand?" The board erupted into concerned murmurs. Dominic caught a glimpse of Valeria's face, a flash of indignation quickly masked by professional detachment. "Shareholders respond to confidence," continued Cordelia. "A wife, children, these signal long-term vision." Dominic stood abruptly. "Then I'll find a wife." The room fell silent. "Within 3 months," he continued, shocking even himself. "I'll host a gala announcing my engagement." After the meeting adjourned, Dominic retreated to his office, loosening his tie with uncharacteristic frustration. Valeria entered moments later carrying the meeting notes. "That was quite a declaration," she said, placing the folder on his desk. "A foolish one." He collapsed into his chair. 3 months to find someone willing to marry a man they know only from business magazines. Valeria hesitated, then spoke softly. "Your wealth will attract many candidates." "Yes. People who want what's in my vaults, not what's in my heart." He gave a hollow laugh. "Patricia taught me that lesson thoroughly." Silence stretched between them until Valeria spoke again. "What if you approach this differently?" "How so?" "A partnership based on mutual respect rather than romantic delusions or financial opportunism." Her voice remained steady, professional. "A contract with clear terms, emotional boundaries, and shared goals." Dominic studied her, intrigued. "You're suggesting I find someone who views marriage as a business arrangement?" "I'm suggesting you find someone who understands both business and humanity. Someone who sees you as more than a balance sheet but doesn't harbor fairy tale expectations." The idea crystallized in his mind with surprising clarity. "Someone like you?" Valeria's composure slipped momentarily before she recovered. "I was speaking hypothetically." "I'm not." Dominic stood circling the desk until they faced each other. "You understand my world. You've never asked for anything beyond professional respect. You've seen me at my worst and remained. Mr. Harrington—" "Dominic," he corrected. "If we're discussing matrimony, first names seem appropriate." A faint blush colored her cheeks. "This is absurd. I'm your assistant. You're the only person in my life who has never tried to use me for personal gain." The realization struck him profoundly. Would it be so terrible? "A partnership based on mutual respect, as you said." Valeria studied him intently. "You're serious?" "Completely." She took a measured breath. "What would such an arrangement entail?" "A 2-year minimum commitment. Public appearances as a couple. Shared residency." He hesitated. "Eventually a child, the heir everyone is so desperate for." "And after the 2 years?" "Freedom to dissolve the arrangement or continue by mutual consent. Financial independence guaranteed either way." Valeria's analytical mind was visibly processing, weighing implications, considering consequences. People would talk. People always talk. At least this time, I'd have someone worth talking about. She moved to the window, gazing out at the city below. "I'd need time to consider." Of course. When she turned back, her expression was resolute. "One condition. If I agree, we present this to the world as genuine. No one can know it began as an arrangement. Not your family, not the board. The child deserves better than that narrative." The announcement came 3 weeks later at a press conference that sent shockwaves through New York society. Dominic Harrington, tech titan and Manhattan's most eligible bachelor, was engaged to his previously unknown assistant. Valeria Navarro. Reporters scrambled to unearth her background. Daughter of a literature professor and a nurse who had immigrated from Spain. Graduate of a state university with honors in business and literature, no connections to wealth or influence. The tabloids were merciless. Cinderella or calculating? The assistant who climbed from desk to diamond ring. That evening, alone in Dominic's penthouse after weathering the media storm, Valeria examined her new engagement ring, elegant but not ostentatious, a perfect oval sapphire surrounded by small diamonds. "Is it suitable?" Dominic asked, watching her from across the room. "It's beautiful," she admitted. "How did you know I prefer sapphires to diamonds?" "You once mentioned your grandmother's sapphire brooch while we were in Barcelona for that conference." He shrugged at her surprised expression. "I listen when you speak." Something shifted in Valeria's gaze, a softening, perhaps recognition that this arrangement might contain more understanding than she'd anticipated. 3 days until the engagement gala," she said. "Are you prepared for your family's reaction?" Dominic smiled wryly. They wanted an heir. They never specified who the mother should be. "Your cousin has already called me a gold digger in 3 separate tabloids." Frederick has always been creative with insults. Dominic moved closer, unexpectedly taking her hand. "Are you having second thoughts?" Valeria's fingers tightened around his, a gesture of solidarity rather than romance. "No. I made a commitment." "To a business arrangement," he reminded her. She met his eyes steadily. "To you, Dominic. The arrangement is just the framework." For the first time since this unusual journey began, Dominic felt something stir within him. Not love, not yet, but possibility. This woman, who had organized his professional life with such calm efficiency, was now reorganizing his personal one, and somehow the world seemed less empty for it. Society's cruel theater. The Harrington summer estate in the Hamptons sprawled across 12 manicured acres, its white columns and blue shutters emanating old money confidence. Inside, however, the atmosphere crackled with tension as Cordelia Harrington circled Valeria like a hawk assessing prey. "A June wedding seems rushed," she remarked, adjusting a flower arrangement that needed no adjustment. "People will talk." "People are already talking, Mother," Dominic replied from across the sunroom. "The date stands. Of course they're talking. You've engaged yourself to your secretary." "Executive assistant," Valeria corrected quietly. Cordelia's eyes narrowed. "Semantics don't change the situation, dear." 3 months into their engagement, Valeria had grown accustomed to these subtle barbs, learning to deflect rather than absorb them. The society pages had been brutal. Harrington Airhook's assistant, love or leverage. Their engagement photos had been scrutinized for signs of authenticity. Their public appearances dissected for evidence of genuine affection. "I've invited the Blackwells for dinner tonight," Cordelia continued. "Their daughter Olivia just returned from finishing school in Switzerland." "Cancel the invitation," Dominic said flatly. "I won't subject my fiancé to more veiled insults." "Dominic." Valeria's voice was soft but firm. "Your mother's friends are important to her. I can manage one dinner." His eyes met hers across the room, concern in his, determination in hers. This unspoken communication had developed between them, a language of glances and subtle gestures that conveyed more than words could safely express. Later, as Valeria prepared for dinner in the guest suite that would soon become theirs, a knock sounded at her door. She opened it to find Dominic's sister Josephine standing there with a jewelry box. "Mother suggested pearls for dinner," Josephine said, her expression unreadable. "She thought yours might be inadequate." Valeria accepted the box with practiced grace. "How thoughtful. Is it worth it?" Josephine asked suddenly. "The scrutiny, the whispers, the constant judgment? Is what worth it?" "Whatever he's giving you in exchange for this charade." Valeria's spine stiffened. "You misunderstand our relationship. Do I?" Josephine's laugh was brittle. "My brother hasn't shown interest in a woman since Patricia humiliated him." "Then suddenly he's marrying his assistant? The mathematics aren't complex." "Perhaps that's why you can't solve the equation," Valeria replied. "You're missing variables." The dinner proceeded exactly as predicted, veiled condescension served alongside 7 elegant courses. The Blackwells asked probing questions about Valeria's humble beginnings, while Cordelia reminisced about families with proper lineage. Through it all, Valeria maintained her composure, occasionally catching Dominic's gaze, his admiration for her dignity increasingly evident. As coffee was served, Theodore Blackwell turned the conversation to business. "I understand Harrington Technologies is preparing to announce a major acquisition." Dominic nodded. "We're in the final stages of due diligence, Rivington Systems," guessed Theodore. "Their neural interface technology would complement your AI division." Before Dominic could respond, Valeria spoke. "Actually, Rivington's patents have significant vulnerability in Asian markets. Their interface architecture infringes on protocols protected in Singapore and Japan." The table fell silent. Theodore blinked in surprise. "Valeria has been instrumental in our acquisition strategy," Dominic explained, not bothering to hide his pride. "She identified the patent issues 3 months ago." "How unusual," murmured Cordelia, "for an assistant to be so involved." "Partner," Dominic corrected, "in every sense of the word." That night, after the guests departed, Dominic found Valeria on the terrace, gazing at the moonlit ocean. "You were magnificent," he said. Offering a glass of wine, she accepted it with a small smile. "I nearly choked on my soup when Mrs. Blackwell asked if I'd had elocution lessons." "I'm sorry you have to endure this." "Don't be. I knew what I was agreeing to." She sipped her wine. "Though I admit, I underestimated your mother's creativity with insults." Dominic laughed, a genuine sound rarely heard in the Harrington household. "A family trait, unfortunately." Valeria studied him in the dim light. "You defended me tonight. Several times. Of course I did. You're my—" He hesitated. "Fiancé," she supplied. "Partner," he corrected again, echoing his earlier declaration. The word hung between them, weighted with meaning beyond their original arrangement. "We should practice," Valeria said suddenly. "Practice what?" "Physical affection. People are beginning to comment on our restraint with each other." Dominic's expression shifted to one of careful neutrality. "What do you suggest?" Without responding, Valeria stepped closer and placed her hand against his chest. He remained perfectly still as she leaned forward and brushed her lips against his cheek, lingering just long enough for the gesture to register as intimate. "There," she whispered, stepping back. That wasn't so difficult. But something had changed in Dominic's eyes. A darkness, an intensity that hadn't been there before. His hand moved to the small of her back, tentative yet deliberate. "If we're practicing," he said quietly, "we should be thorough." He drew her closer. Their bodies aligned in a way their contractual arrangement hadn't anticipated. When his lips met hers, the kiss began as performance but quickly transformed into something neither had prepared for, something genuine and unscripted. When they separated, both were breathing unevenly. Valeria stepped back first, her professional composure reasserting itself despite the flush on her cheeks. "That should convince anyone watching," she managed, her voice not quite steady. Dominic nodded, though his expression suggested he was processing something far more complex than public perception. "Yes, quite convincing." As Valeria retreated to her suite, confusion clouded her thoughts. Their arrangement had been clear, practical, logical, mutually beneficial. Emotions weren't part of the contract. Yet as she touched her fingers to her lips, still warm from his, she confronted an uncomfortable truth. The lines they had so carefully drawn were beginning to blur, and neither seemed entirely eager to redraw them. Fractured facades' rain lashed against the windows of the Harrington penthouse as thunder rumbled across the Manhattan skyline. Inside, an equally turbulent scene unfolded. "Explain this." Dominic's voice was dangerously quiet as he placed a manila envelope on the coffee table between them. Valeria, still in her evening gown from the charity auction they'd attended, regarded the envelope warily. "What is it?" "Open it." Inside were photographs, grainy but unmistakable, showing Valeria meeting with Bennett Crawford, CEO of Harrington Technology's chief competitor. The images captured them in what appeared to be an intimate conversation, his hand touching her arm, her expression earnest. "You've been meeting with Crawford." It wasn't a question. "Yes." "For how long?" Valeria maintained her composure despite the accusation in his tone. 3 weeks. 8 months into their marriage, they had established rhythms, routines, a comfortable coexistence that had gradually evolved beyond their initial arrangement. The press had finally tired of questioning their relationship, and even Cordelia had begun treating Valeria with grudging respect after she'd masterfully handled a public relations crisis involving a data breach. But now, as rain pounded against the glass, the trust they'd carefully constructed seemed suddenly fragile. "Were you going to tell me you've been secretly meeting our biggest competitor?" Dominic paced the living room, his usual controlled demeanor fracturing. "I was waiting for the right time. The right time to explain why my wife is having clandestine meetings with a man who's been trying to destroy my company for 5 years?" His voice rose. "Do you realize how this looks? My assistant-turned-wife suddenly meeting with Crawford?" The implication stung more than she expected. "You think I'm selling company secrets?" "I don't know what to think." He ran a hand through his hair. "Frederick showed me these photos and suggested—" "Frederick?" Valeria's eyes flashed. "Of course. Your cousin has been waiting for an opportunity to undermine me from the beginning." "He's family?" "So am I," she said quietly. "At least legally." Dominic stopped pacing, the painful reminder of their arrangement's fundamentals hanging in the air between them. "Why were you meeting with Crawford?" he asked finally. Valeria hesitated. "I can't tell you." His expression hardened. "Can't or won't?" "Both." "That's not acceptable. It will have to be." She stood, gathering her composure along with the folds of her gown. "You'll have to trust me." "Trust?" He laughed bitterly. "Our relationship began as a business arrangement, Valeria. Where exactly does trust factor into that?" The words hit their mark with precision. Something flickered in her eyes, pain perhaps, or resignation, before she concealed it. "Then perhaps we should remember that this is merely an arrangement," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "And arrangements can be terminated when they no longer serve their purpose." She retreated to their bedroom, closing the door with quiet finality. Inside, she sank onto the edge of the bed, fingers twisting her wedding ring, the sapphire catching the lightning flashes from outside. In the weeks that followed, a careful distance grew between them. They maintained appearances in public, hands clasped, rehearsed smiles, practiced endearments, but in private, conversation dwindled to logistics and necessities. Dominic began sleeping in the guest room, citing late work hours as the reason. The household staff exchanged concerned glances. Cordelia watched with calculating eyes. Frederick's smug satisfaction was barely concealed during family gatherings. Then came the announcement that shattered their fragile détente. Valeria was pregnant. The news broke first in their doctor's office, then rippled through the Harrington empire like a stone dropped in still water. Dominic received congratulations with mechanical smiles. While privately grappling with emotions he hadn't anticipated, joy mixed with confusion, pride tangled with lingering distrust. The pregnancy had been part of their agreement, yet somehow the reality of it changed everything. The child, their child, was no longer a theoretical future obligation, but a growing reality. 3 days after the announcement, Dominic returned home early to find Valeria sorting through baby clothes sent by well-wishers. She looked up in surprise, a tiny green onesie in her hands. "You're home early. Board meeting finished sooner than expected." He hesitated, then joined her on the sofa, careful to maintain space between them. "How are you feeling?" "Better. The morning sickness is finally subsiding." An awkward silence descended until Dominic spoke again. "Crawford announced a major restructuring today. He's stepping down as CEO." Valeria's hands stilled. "I see. He's facing federal investigation for insider trading and securities fraud." Dominic watched her closely. Apparently, someone provided authorities with evidence going back 5 years. Understanding dawned slowly in Valeria's eyes. Dominic, my cousin worked with Crawford, he continued. Frederick has been selling company information for years. That's how Crawford always stayed one step ahead of us. How did you discover this? An anonymous source provided documentation to the SEC. He met her gaze steadily. The same documentation you've been collecting during your meetings with Crawford. Valeria set down the baby clothes carefully. I couldn't tell you. If Frederick suspected you knew, he would have destroyed the evidence. You've been investigating my cousin for months, since I overheard him on the phone at the engagement party. She hesitated. I needed proof before making accusations against a Harrington. Dominic's expression softened with realization. You were protecting the family. Protecting me. Of course I was. The words escaped before she could temper them with professional distance. He reached across the space between them, taking her hand. Why didn't you trust me with the truth? Because you said it yourself, I'm just your assistant-turned-wife. An arrangement, her voice caught. Why would you believe me over blood? Because somewhere along the way, this stopped being just an arrangement for me. His fingers tightened around hers. And I think it did for you too. The admission hung between them, too honest to dismiss, too fragile to embrace fully. Valeria placed her free hand over her stomach, where their child grew. This was never in the contract, she whispered. What wasn't? Feeling this way. Her eyes met his, vulnerability replacing her usual composure. It was supposed to be simple, clinical, and now there's nothing simple about it. Dominic moved closer, bridging the physical and emotional distance they'd maintained. I don't want an arrangement anymore, Valeria. I want what we've been pretending to have all along. What if it's too late? What if we've built everything on the wrong foundation? Then we rebuild. His hand joined hers over their unborn child. Not for appearances or business or family expectations. For us. For this. As thunder rumbled in the distance, a gentle echo of the storm that had nearly torn them apart. Valeria leaned forward until her forehead rested against his. I never expected to fall in love with my boss, she admitted softly. Dominic's smile was tender as he cupped her face. And I never expected to fall in love with my wife. Beyond bloodlines, morning light streamed through the hospital room windows, painting golden patterns across the bassinet where 6-hour-old Julian Harrington slept, oblivious to the profound changes his arrival had wrought. Dominic stood beside the crib, transfixed by the tiny features that somehow combined his brow with Valeria's delicate nose. He's perfect, he whispered, afraid to wake either his son or his exhausted wife. Valeria observed them from her bed, dark hair tumbling around shoulders that had carried so much weight over the past year. He has your frown, she noted with tender amusement. And your determination. Did you hear how loudly he announced himself to the world? They shared a smile, not the practiced ones they'd perfected for public consumption, but genuine expressions of shared joy. A soft knock interrupted the moment. Cordelia Harrington entered, her usual imposing presence subdued by the solemnity of becoming a grandmother. Behind her trailed Josephine, carrying an elaborate floral arrangement. Is this our Harrington heir? Cordelia approached the bassinet with uncharacteristic hesitation. This is Julian, Dominic confirmed, his protective stance beside the crib unmistakable. Cordelia studied the infant with critical eyes that gradually softened. He has the Harrington chin. She glanced at Valeria. And his mother's eyes, I think. The acknowledgement, subtle but significant, wasn't lost on anyone in the room. For the first time, Cordelia had referenced Valeria not as Dominic's assistant or wife, but as the mother of a Harrington. Josephine placed the flowers on a side table before approaching Valeria's bedside. He's beautiful, she offered, a peace treaty extended after months of Cold War. Would you like to hold your nephew? Valeria asked. Surprise registered on Josephine's face before she nodded. As Dominic carefully transferred Julian to his sister's arms, Valeria caught a glimpse of the family they might become. Not perfect or without conflict, but connected by something stronger than obligation. Cordelia cleared her throat. The board sends their congratulations. They're eager for the official announcement. Julian isn't a corporate milestone, Mother, Dominic replied, though without the edge that would have accompanied such words a year earlier. Of course not. But he is the future of everything we've built. She hesitated, then added, everything you've both built. The correction, small but significant, marked a shift in the family's tectonic plates. After the visitors departed, Dominic joined Valeria on the edge of her hospital bed. That went better than expected. Your mother actually made eye contact with me, Valeria marveled. Progress indeed. She's learning. We all are. He took her hand, his thumb brushing over her wedding ring. I've been thinking about our arrangement. Valeria tensed slightly. What about it? Our 2-year agreement ends next month. The reminder hung between them. Though their feelings had transformed, the contractual foundation of their marriage remained an unaddressed reality. Yes, she acknowledged. It does. Dominic reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. I think we need a new arrangement. Inside lay a ring identical to her engagement sapphire, but with one significant difference. Engraved inside the band were the words, "Not an arrangement, a choice." What is this? Valeria whispered. A proposal. A real one this time. Dominic's eyes held hers with unguarded emotion. No contracts, no terms, no exit clauses. Just us choosing each other every day for however long we both want that choice. Tears gathered in Valeria's eyes. Are you asking me to marry you when we're already married? I'm asking if you'll stay married to me because you want to, not because we agreed to. He took the ring from its box. I'm asking if you'll be my wife because I love you, not because my family needed an heir. From the bassinet came a soft whimper, Julian stirring in his sleep as if sensing the gravity of the moment. We began this backwards, Dominic continued. Marriage first, partnership second, friendship after that. Love was never meant to be part of the equation. He smiled ruefully. I've always been terrible at following business plans. Valeria laughed softly through her tears. So have I, apparently. She held out her left hand, allowing him to slide the new ring alongside her wedding band. Yes, she said simply. I choose you. I choose us. 5 years later, the Harrington summer estate hosted a different kind of gathering. Gone were the stilted dinner parties and strategic social alignments. Instead, the sprawling lawn teemed with children chasing bubbles, while adults mingled without regard for social hierarchies or business advantages. Julian, now a spirited 5-year-old with his father's intensity and his mother's perceptiveness, led a pack of cousins on an expedition to the tide pools. Beside him toddled his 2-year-old sister, Sophia, determined to keep pace despite her unsteady legs. Under a white canopy, Dominic and Valeria greeted guests celebrating their vow renewal, a ceremony that had been entirely their idea rather than a social obligation. Quite the transformation, remarked Regina Powell, a board member who had once questioned Valeria's credentials. 5 years ago, who would have imagined the Harrington estate filled with children's laughter? Life rarely follows the expected path, Valeria replied, watching as Dominic abandoned a business conversation to rescue Sophia from a puddle. Cordelia approached, elegant as ever despite the casual setting. The children are thriving, she observed, pride evident in her voice. Julian already shows remarkable aptitude for mathematics. And literature, Valeria added. He's his own person, not just a Harrington heir. Cordelia nodded, a tacit acknowledgement of how priorities had shifted. You've built something remarkable here, she said quietly. Something beyond bloodlines and balance sheets. Across the lawn, Dominic caught Valeria's eye and smiled, that private expression reserved only for her. In it was the recognition of their unlikely journey, from a business arrangement born of obligation to a partnership forged in respect, tempered by challenges and ultimately transformed by a love neither had anticipated. Later, as evening descended and guests departed, they stood together on the beach, watching their children construct an elaborate sandcastle at the water's edge. Do you ever think about how this all began? Dominic asked, his arm around her waist. Sometimes. Valeria leaned into him. Would you change anything if you could go back? He considered the question seriously. I would have seen you sooner, he decided. All those years you were right there, organizing my life, and I never truly looked. We weren't ready then, she replied. We needed to become these versions of ourselves first. Julian called from the shoreline, proudly displaying a shell he'd discovered. Both parents waved acknowledgement, their fingers intertwined. You know what Frederick said at the board meeting last week? Dominic asked. That I'm the first Harrington in 3 generations to have found actual happiness instead of just accumulating success. Is he right? Dominic looked at their children, then back to the woman who had entered his life as an employee and become its cornerstone. Yes, he said simply. I believe he is. As the sun sank toward the horizon, painting the world in soft gold and rose, they remained on the shore. Not the billionaire and his assistant, not the power couple navigating social politics, but simply a family building castles in the sand, redefining legacy with each grain.